as practitioners and healers, we have a natural desire to heal, to fix, to correct, because we have a passion. We want to prevent harm. But what happens is that often we'll have the opposite effect on especially ambivalent patients. And when I talk about ambivalence, these are the people that know that what their behavior should be. They want to change their behavior. They see the benefit in changing their behavior, but they'll always hit the but button, meaning like they'll say, oh, I have diabetes, but it's not that bad. Or I have diabetes, but I can just take some more insulin. And it's just human nature for a lot of us to become defensive, or for these patients, especially, to become defensive. And when somebody's defensive, it lights up a part of their brain called the amygdala, which is the fight or flight response. And so it feels like a perceived threat. So they're not going to be receptive to any information that we are providing. And as practitioners, that's what we want to educate people so that they make different choices. But if they're not open to it, it's really difficult. So the key is that we've got to move everything from the amygdala here into the prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of the brain. And so when we move the thoughts from this back part where they're feeling threatened to the front, they're able to process, and it's the rational part of their brain. So it makes them more open to be perceptive to any advice or any recommendations that you are going to be giving. So this is where the hostage negotiation techniques were very helpful. There were 2 skills that I learned from that, and they fall under the umbrella of acknowledging feelings. When we acknowledge feelings, we're able to move the thoughts from the amygdala up to the prefrontal cortex. And there's 2 ways to do that. The first one is called mirroring. And mirroring is a technique that you use when you simply basically repeat back what the person said. And it's best to try to use the words that they used so that they understand that they're feeling heard. So for Brad, when he said he was surprised, I was like, yeah, I could see why that would be surprising. And the other technique I used was labeling. So you label their feelings. So for Brad, I had told him, I was like, that must have been really shocking and disappointing. And don't worry about labeling something wrong. The whole point is you just want to make sure that you label it. People will correct you. They'll let you know if you mislabeled them. But the point is that we're trying to diffuse their defense mechanisms so that they're more open and willing to hear what you have to say eventually. I want to make sure I understand their motivation. My motivation is I want Brad to not have a heart attack or need an amputation or go on dialysis, but that's not necessarily Brad's motivations. And people will change when they have some skin in the game. And the reasons for their change has to be their own personal argument and not yours. And so in order to get lasting effects, because the motivation, when it becomes internal, that creates a lasting effect. Because it's inevitable that people are going to hit obstacles when they make changes. And when we hit an obstacle, if that motivation isn't internal, if they don't have the drive coming in from within themselves, they're not going to continue with the change in the habit. The last thing I did with unmotivated patients, we also want to take gradual or incremental steps. They have to be easy. Because, and you want to make sure it feels collaborative and that the patient feels empowered. So I start with like one really small change and I'll ask if they're into it, because the buy-in is super important. So for Brad, it was like, well, can you just check your blood sugars every morning? Change nothing else. And he started to just naturally change his own behaviors and habits when he started to see his blood sugars. And then we started talking about just dinner. And it's these small actions that makes the patient not feel so overwhelmed. And they're able to stick to it for longer periods of time. Before I end, I just want to let you know that motivating patients to take care of themselves, it really can feel super time consuming and really frustrating. But when we implement some of these types of techniques, we can really help patients see what's best for them without actually lecturing them. And that's what leads to the lasting results. And they'll tend to have this ripple effect because they'll inspire other people.